dudes, my name is Mocked, and welcome to Reflected Cross-Site Scripting. Today we're going to be doing the very first Reflected Cross-Site Scripting lab on PortSwigger Academy. Before we jump into the lab, we need to try to understand what is cross-site scripting. Now if we go onto the PortSwigger Academy cross-site scripting page, we can see that they explain everything to us before we even get to the lab. You'll see here this really robust explanation of what cross-site scripting is. We see this cool little drawing thing that for all you visual learners out there, you can see the process of how cross-site scripting works. But for a 101 video like this, think of cross-site scripting as just the ability to execute arbitrary JavaScript code within a web application. Now, what is the impact of cross-site scripting? Well, it depends if it's reflected, if it's stored, if it's DOM, etc. But one very big purpose of cross-site scripting attacks is to obtain user information to try to elevate your privileges. So this is the web application for the lab. Now, our mission is we're supposed to execute some reflected cross-site scripting somewhere in this web application. Now what we can do is we can kind of crawl the web application, see all the functions, see what it does, get a feel for, everything. So if we click a few of these, we see that it just comes up with, a little explanation, maybe like a blog, picture. There's a leave a comment, which is pretty interesting. And the reason why this is interesting is this would be a really good place to try to test some stored cross-site scripting. Because when you leave a comment, like we see here, it's stored on the page. So if you can execute some JavaScript here, you can do a document.cookie, or you can do some fancier things to send that data back to yourself, to like your attack server or something. It will persistently be there until the comment gets deleted. But that's not why we're here. We're here for the reflected cross-site scripting, which means that we want to look for something on the web app that reflects user input. So this kind of is, kind of reflected, I guess, but it's stored. So if we refresh this page, the comments are stored. They're not necessarily reflected in the web page. So if we go back to the main screen, we see this search functionality. So a lot of search functionalities, what they'll do is they'll take in the user input and then they'll just display it on screen somewhere. So let's test that out. And as we can see here, it does reflect our input on the page. So before we go in guns blazing with some cross-site scripting payloads, let's test it a little bit. Let's do a little recon and see how the web application handles certain inputs. So a good input to test is using H1, 2, or 3 tags. The reason for this is if the web app is executing those tags, you'll visibly see the reflected input on screen either be bigger or smaller depending on which tags you use. And then that's a good indication that that parameter might be vulnerable to cross-site scripting. So our input doesn't look that different. Let's go ahead and right-click on it and inspect it and see what tags are going on. So we see here the H3 tags are in place, and then the results, just right above it, that little string, they're in H1 tags. So it kind of looks like we've successfully applied the H3 tags. But if we right-click it and click Edit as HTML, we can see if anything's being HTML escaped. And it looks like the tags are taken in and executed as, the H3 tags. They're not being encoded, they're not being escaped, nothing's happening there. So it looks like this is probably vulnerable to cross-site scripting. Now for cross-site scripting, let's talk about the payloads. In this lab, they want us to use an alert box. So alert 1, alert anything, that'll get you to solve the lab. And then once we click search, we should get that pop-up message saying 1. And we do. So we've successfully executed some arbitrary JavaScript code within the web application. Now we click OK, we'll be brought back to the web app. And hey, we solved the lab. All right. Alternatively, instead of using an alert box, you can use the prompt box, which I personally really enjoy using. So that payload looks like this. It's the same thing as the alert, except it's going to prompt the user for some kind of input. So let's hit that search bar and see what we got. And we can see here that we did still get an alert pop-up. However, it's prompting us to enter our password. So we can go ahead and enter in password or whatever we want and click OK. And now, presumably, after you click OK, all that data gets sent back to the attacker. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you want me to do additional content on cross-site scripting or any vulnerabilities out there, and you want to see the mitigation, the code side of life, toss something down in the comments, give me a hello world, or give me something code related. Take care.